The first thing my brother said to me after our mother's funeral was, "You know you can't stay here anymore, right?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't sound angry. He said it the way someone mentions the weather or reminds you that milk has expired. We were standing in the driveway of my parents' house in Evanston, Illinois, black coats still on, the smell of lilies from the service clinging to everything. The hearse had barely turned the corner. I was 31 years old, holding a folded program in one hand and my car keys in the other. And for a moment, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. "What?" I asked. My brother, Daniel Mercer, adjusted his cufflinks. He'd worn the same navy suit he always wore to important events: weddings, board meetings, court hearings where he represented other people's problems for a living. He didn't look at me when he answered. "I mean long term," he said. "Obviously, you can stay a few nights. We're not monsters. But this house is complicated." Complicated. That was the word he used. Not mine, not yours, not ours. Complicated. Behind him, his wife Lauren stood near their SUV, scrolling on her phone, already halfway checked out. My aunt from Ohio was hugging my cousin near the porch. Neighbors lingered awkwardly, unsure when it was appropriate to leave. My mother had been buried less than an hour ago. "I moved back here to take care of her," I said. My voice sounded steady, which surprised me. "You know that." Daniel nodded, like he was indulging a child. "And we appreciate that, truly. But now, things are changing." That was the first time I felt it. Not grief, not shock. Displacement. This house wasn't just where my parents lived. It was where I'd come back to after my engagement fell apart 2 years earlier. Where I'd slept on a twin bed while my mother went through chemo. Where I worked remotely at the dining room table, juggling deadlines with doctor appointments. Where I learned how quiet a house can get when someone you love is slowly disappearing. And now, apparently, it was something I was temporarily allowed to occupy. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't ask what he meant by changing. I just nodded. That silence would come back to haunt him. Later that night, after the casseroles were stacked in the fridge and the sympathy cards lined the kitchen counter, Daniel and Lauren sat across from me at the table, like we were negotiating a business deal. "We've been talking," Lauren said, finally looking up from her phone, "and we think it's best if we handle the estate quickly, clean, no confusion." Daniel slid a folder toward me. Empty. Just a gesture. "As the oldest," he continued, "Mom always trusted me with the big stuff. Finances, legal things. You know how she was." I did know how she was. She trusted Daniel because he demanded it, because he spoke louder, because when he said jump, the rest of us asked how high. "What about the will?" I asked. There it was. The smallest question. The one that changed everything. Daniel smiled. Not warmly, strategically. "It's straightforward," he said. "House goes into a family trust, managed by me, obviously. Liquid assets will be divided, but there are conditions." "What conditions?" I asked. Lauren cleared her throat. "We think it makes sense for you to take a cash payout, enough to get on your feet. Start fresh." Start fresh. Another phrase people use when they want you gone. "And the house?" I asked. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Emily, be realistic. You don't need a 4-bedroom house in Evanston. Property taxes alone." "So I don't get a say," I said quietly. He sighed, like I was exhausting him. "You get a say. This is us including you." That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling that had been there since I was 12. My phone buzzed with text from friends who meant well. I didn't answer any of them. I kept thinking about Christmas last year, how Daniel and Lauren hosted it at their place downtown and forgot to tell me they'd moved dinner up by 2 hours. How I arrived late, apologetic, only to find dessert already served and my seat given to Lauren's cousin. "Sorry," Daniel had said then. "Things get busy." I told myself it didn't matter, that family was family. That belief was cracking now. The next morning, while Daniel slept in the guest room and Lauren went for a run, I walked into my father's old office. The room smelled like dust and lemon polish. His desk was still cluttered with yellow legal pads and fountain pens he never threw away. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was in the bottom drawer, beneath tax records and outdated insurance policies. I found a slim envelope with my name written on it in my mother's handwriting. Emily. Inside was a single sentence written in blue ink. Do not let them rush you. That was when I understood. Whatever was happening wasn't new. It wasn't spontaneous grief or stress or misunderstanding. It was a plan, and I was already behind. At the end of the hallway, I heard Daniel's voice, low and irritated, on the phone. Yeah, he said, she's still here, but it won't be for long. I closed the drawer quietly. That was the moment I stopped being passive, and the moment he underestimated me for the last time. By the third day after the funeral, the house no longer felt like mine. Daniel started every morning with phone calls in the kitchen, his voice lowered, but never quiet enough. I caught fragments as I passed by with my coffee. Trust structure, liquidity, timeline. He spoke about my parents' life like it was a spreadsheet that needed cleaning up. Lauren rearranged things, slowly at first, then with intention. She moved framed photos from the hallway to a box near the stairs. She replaced my mother's soap in the downstairs bathroom with something lavender and expensive. She didn't ask. She never did. It was subtle. That was the part that hurt the most. No one told me to leave outright. They just behaved as if I already had. On Thursday afternoon, Daniel asked me to sit with him on the back porch. It was cold for April, the kind of Midwest chill that seeps into your bones even when the sun is out. My mother used to sit here, wrapped in a blanket, watching the birds fight over the feeder. I sat in her chair. Daniel took my father's. I spoke to the lawyer, he said. What lawyer? I asked. Our lawyer. The firm that handled Dad's business stuff toward the end. He didn't say a name. He never said names when he wanted flexibility. He agrees we should avoid probate complications, Daniel continued. So we're moving fast. I waited. You'll receive a payout, he said, once the paperwork is finalized. 30 days, maybe less. And until then? I asked. He hesitated. Just long enough for me to notice. Well, he said, Lauren and I will be staying here more often. Easier to oversee things. Oversee. Another word. You're asking me to leave, I said. I'm asking you to be reasonable. There it was, the familiar pivot. If I objected, I would be emotional. If I stayed quiet, I would be agreeable. Either way, the outcome was decided. I need to see the will, I said. Daniel laughed softly. Emily, you wouldn't understand half of it. I'm not asking to interpret it, I said. I'm asking to see it. Lauren appeared in the doorway then, arms crossed, listening. We'll show it to you when everything is finalized, she said. No need to stir things up. Stir things up. As if the ground beneath me wasn't already shaking. That night, I called my friend Marissa, the only person who knew the full story of why my engagement had ended, why I came back home, why I stayed. You sound calm, she said, after I explained everything. I'm not, I said. I just don't know what panic is useful yet. There was a pause. Emily, she said carefully, have you talked to your own lawyer? No. Why not? Because for years, I'd been trained not to challenge Daniel. Not openly, not directly. He was older, smarter, louder. The family fixer, and I was the one who adjusted. I don't even know where to start, I said. Marissa exhaled. I do. My cousin's an estate attorney. I'll text you his name. I almost said no. Almost convinced myself it would make things worse. Instead, I said thank you. The next morning, Daniel handed me a printed timeline over breakfast. Move-out assistance. Temporary housing options. Estimated disbursement date. He slipped. You've already decided, I said. This is for your benefit, he replied. I looked at the page. There was a line item labeled Personal Effects Retrieval, as if my life here could be scheduled. I'm not. Daniel froze. Just for a second. Excuse me? I'm not agreeing to any timeline, I repeated. Not until I've seen the will. Not until I've spoken to counsel. Lauren scoffed. This is getting dramatic. No, I said. This is getting clear. Daniel stood up. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I stood too. You started making it hard when you decided for me. Silence stretched between us. Not explosive. Heavy. That afternoon, I took a walk through the neighborhood. Past the elementary school where my mother used to volunteer. Past the corner store where my father bought the paper every morning. People waved, offered condolences, asked how Daniel was doing. No one asked how I was. That night, after Daniel and Lauren went out to dinner, I went back into my father's office. I searched properly this time. In a file labeled Mercer Consulting, I found correspondence between my father and an attorney named Raymond Cole, dated 6 months before his death. Not the firm Daniel mentioned. Tucked inside was a handwritten note. If Daniel pressures Emily, delay everything. My chest tightened. This wasn't paranoia. It wasn't grief. My parents had anticipated this. The next morning, I met Raymond Cole in a small office overlooking Lake Michigan. He was older than I expected, with kind eyes and a careful way of speaking. Your parents were very precise, he said after I explained. Especially your mother. About what? I asked. About power, he said, and how it moves quietly in families. He slid a copy of the will across the table. It wasn't simple. It wasn't short. And it didn't say what Daniel told me it did. I didn't smile. I didn't feel relieved. I felt something colder, because now I knew. And Daniel had no idea that the ground beneath him was already shifting. I didn't confront Daniel right away. That surprised even me. I spent the next 2 days doing something I'd never done in this house before. I observed. Not emotionally, logistically. Daniel was efficient, but careless. He assumed authority meant invisibility, that no one questioned the hand that held the pen. Lauren was sharper. She asked questions in private, pushed in small ways, tested edges. She noticed things disappearing from rooms. She noticed when I stopped eating dinner with them. She didn't notice when I stopped speaking unless spoken to. Raymond Cole had sent me home with a copy of the will and a warning. Don't reveal what you know until you understand what they're trying to do, he said. People show their intent fastest when they think you're cornered, so I let them believe I was. On Sunday afternoon, Daniel hosted a small family meeting in the living room. My aunt from Ohio joined on speakerphone. Lauren poured wine. Daniel stood near the fireplace like he was delivering a quarterly update. We want transparency, he said, so everyone's on the same page. Transparency. He used that word often, usually right before withholding information. The house will be placed in a revocable trust, he continued. I'll act as trustee. Emily will receive a buyout based on fair market value minus outstanding obligations. What obligations? I asked. He smiled patiently. Medical expenses, care costs, maintenance, taxes. Things Mom and Dad covered while you were living here. I felt the room tilt slightly. You're charging me? I said, for taking care of our mother? Lauren cut in. No one's charging you. We're just accounting. Accounting. Another clean word. My aunt's voice crackled through the phone. That doesn't seem right. Daniel sighed. This is exactly why we need to simplify. Emotions are high. I said nothing. Later that night, Lauren knocked on my door. I don't want this to get ugly, she said, leaning against the frame. Daniel's under a lot of pressure. So am I replied. She studied me. You don't have kids. You don't have a mortgage. This house means more to us. That was the first time she said it out loud. I lived here, I said, for 2 years. And now it's time to move forward, she replied. I nodded. That night, I emailed Raymond. They're building a case to reduce my share, I wrote. They're framing care as debt. His reply came 10 minutes later. As expected. Do not engage. Do not sign. And Emily, check the safe. What safe? I typed. Your father installed one behind the bookshelf. 3rd shelf from the bottom. Left side. I waited until the house was asleep. The bookshelf slid aside easily, like it had been waiting. Behind it was a narrow metal door. The code was my parents' anniversary. Of course it was. Inside were documents, old deeds, insurance policies, and a sealed envelope marked only if necessary. Inside that envelope was a notarized letter. In the event Daniel attempts to remove Emily from the house or financially coerce her, this letter authorizes immediate transfer of the property into Emily's sole name. No trust, no intermediary. My hands were steady as I read it. They had planned for this. The next morning, Daniel announced he'd scheduled an appraisal. They'll be here Tuesday, he said. Standard procedure. I nodded. Okay. That afternoon, Raymond filed an injunction. Tuesday came and went without an appraiser. Instead, a courier arrived with legal papers. Daniel opened them at the kitchen counter. I watched his face change. Confusion first, then irritation, Then something tighter. "What is this?" he demanded. "A pause," I said calmly. "On all estate actions." "You can't do that," he snapped. "I can," I said. And I did. Lauren stepped closer. "Emily, what are you doing?" "Protecting myself," I replied. Daniel laughed sharply. "You don't have the authority." I reached into my bag and placed a copy of the will on the counter. "You should read page 14, I said. Slowly. He did. The room went silent. Lauren read it too. Her face drained of color. "This isn't the version we saw," she said. "No," I replied. "It isn't." Daniel looked up at me, eyes hard. "You went behind my back." "I went in front of yours," I said. "You just didn't see me." He pushed the papers away. "This will be contested." "By whom?" I asked. "You?" His jaw tightened. That evening, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives. Confusion, concern, a few subtle accusations. Daniel had started telling his version. I didn't respond. Instead, I packed a bag. Not to leave, to be ready. Because the next move wouldn't be paperwork. It would be pressure. And this time, it wouldn't be quiet. Pressure doesn't arrive loudly at first. It seeps in through other people. By Wednesday morning, my phone was full of messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins asking if everything was okay. An uncle suggesting we handle this like adults. My grandmother's church friend leaving a voicemail about forgiveness. No one asked what Daniel had done. They only asked why I was making things difficult. Daniel had always been good at that, framing resistance as disruption. At breakfast, Lauren didn't look at me. She packed her laptop bag with sharp movements, the zipper louder than it needed to be. "This is tearing the family apart," she said to Daniel, not to me. Daniel rubbed his temples. "I don't recognize her anymore." I kept my eyes on my coffee. That afternoon, the locks on the back door didn't work. I noticed when I tried to step outside to water the plants my mother loved. The key turned halfway and stopped. I tried again. Nothing. Daniel was in the living room on a call. "Hey," I said, holding up the key. "Did you change the locks?" He covered the phone. "No, probably old hardware." It wasn't. By evening, the Wi-Fi password had changed. My work laptop wouldn't connect. When I asked Lauren, she shrugged. "We updated the router," she said. "I'll send you the password later." She didn't. That night, I slept with my phone on the pillow beside me. At 6:42 a.m., there was a knock at my door. Daniel stood there, fully dressed, jacket on. "We need to talk," he said. I followed him into the kitchen. He slid a document across the counter. This one wasn't empty. It was a notice. "Temporary occupancy agreement," he said. "Just to keep things civil." I skimmed it. My name appeared exactly 3 times. His appeared everywhere else. "You're giving me 14 days, I said. "It's generous," he replied. "You're locking me out of rooms," I said. "Cutting off utilities." "Don't be dramatic." I looked up at him. "Did you change the locks?" He hesitated. "Just enough. For safety," he said. That was the moment something in me settled. Not anger, not fear, clarity. "I'm not signing this," I said. Daniel's voice hardened. "Emily, you're forcing my hand." I nodded. "Good." At noon, Raymond called. "They're escalating," I said. "As expected," he replied. "I'm filing for exclusive occupancy." "Of the house?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "And Emily, document everything." That afternoon, Lauren confronted me in the hallway. "You're embarrassing us," she said. "Daniel's getting calls from his firm." "That sounds stressful," I replied. She stared at me. "You think you're winning?" "I think I'm done being quiet," I said. She laughed bitterly. "You don't belong here anymore." I held her gaze. "Neither do you." That evening, my grandmother called. "I raised Daniel to be responsible," she said. "He's just trying to do what's right." "I know," I replied. "He always is." There was a long pause. "Emily," she said softly, "this house is too big for one person." "So is grief," I said. "But here we are." She didn't respond. The next morning, a process server came to the house. Daniel opened the door. I watched from the stairs as his face shifted from irritation to something closer to alarm. "What is this?" he asked. "Court order," the server replied. "Exclusive occupancy granted to Emily Mercer, pending probate review." Daniel turned slowly. Lauren appeared behind him. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "you have 48 hours to leave." Silence. You can't be serious, Daniel said. I am, I replied. Lauren laughed, sharp and disbelieving. This is insane. You changed the locks, I said. You cut utilities. You attempted to coerce me out. The judge didn't like that. Daniel's voice rose. You went to a judge? Yes, I said. That's what people do when someone takes away their choices. Lauren's face flushed. Where are we supposed to go? I shrugged. You're resourceful. Daniel stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. That night, they packed. Not quietly. Drawers slammed, boxes scraped against walls. Lauren cried loudly on the phone to someone about betrayal. Daniel avoided looking at me. When they left, the house exhaled. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, my hands shaking for the first time in days. Not from fear, from release. At midnight, I walked through every room and turned on every light. The house was mine again. Not legally, not fully, but physically. I slept in my parents' room that night. In the morning, I woke to a message from Raymond. Good work, it read. But brace yourself. Next comes the smear. Outside, a moving truck idled at the curb. Daniel stood beside it, phone pressed to his ear, talking animatedly to someone. I watched from the window as he pointed at the house. I knew that gesture. He wasn't done, and neither was I. The smear didn't start with lies. It started with concern. By Monday morning, I had 3 emails from Daniel's friends, all phrased almost identically. They hoped I was taking care of myself. They'd heard I was struggling. One suggested grief counseling. Another offered to connect me with a realtor who specialized in downsizing transitions. No one asked why Daniel had been removed from the house by court order. They already had their answer. At noon, I got a call from HR at my company. Emily, my manager, said gently, "We received an inquiry this morning." My stomach tightened. About what? About whether you're fit to continue working remotely, she said. Someone expressed concern about your mental health. I closed my eyes. Who? I asked. She hesitated. A family member. Daniel hadn't accused me outright. He'd implied. He'd painted a picture of a grieving, unstable sister making impulsive legal decisions. It was careful. Almost kind. It was also calculated. I'm fine, I said, and I can provide documentation if needed. That won't be necessary, she replied, but I wanted you to know. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the grain of the wood my father had refinished himself. This was the part Daniel understood better than anyone else. He didn't need to win legally if he could make people doubt me. I forwarded the email thread to Raymond. His response came quickly. Expected. We'll counter quietly. How? I typed. With truth, he replied. And timing. That afternoon, a woman I didn't recognize knocked on the door. Mid-40s, clipboard, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Adult Protective Services, she said. We received a report requesting a wellness check. I let her in. She looked around the house, asked routine questions. Was I eating, sleeping, taking care of myself? Did I feel safe? Yes, I said to all of it. She glanced at the court order on the counter. Her tone shifted slightly. Who made the report? I asked. She didn't answer directly. A concerned relative. I nodded. When she left, I locked the door and sat on the floor in the hallway, my back against the wall. Not crying, just breathing. Daniel had crossed a line. That evening, Raymond called me instead of emailing. He's overreaching, he said. That helps us. I don't want to destroy him, I said. I know, Raymond replied, but you do need to protect yourself. The next morning, I filed my own documentation. Emails, lock changes, utility interruptions, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen the moving truck, a timeline, facts, not feelings. By Thursday, Daniel's tone changed. He called me for the first time since leaving. We need to talk, he said. Through lawyers, I replied. Emily, he snapped, irritation bleeding through. This has gone too far. I almost laughed. I agree, I said. That weekend, my grandmother invited me to lunch. She chose a restaurant halfway between her house and Daniel's new rental. Neutral ground. That should have been my first clue. Daniel was already there when I arrived. So this was a setup, I said calmly. He stood. Sit down. I did. Grandma folded her hands. Your brother is worried. I'm sure, I said. He says you're being influenced, she continued, By outsiders. I met Daniel's eyes. By a lawyer? He looked away. This family doesn't solve problems in court, Grandma said. This family, I replied, doesn't solve problems at all. It buries them. Daniel leaned forward. If you drop the injunction, we can revisit the trust. There is no trust, I said. You invented that. He clenched his jaw. You're going to lose everyone if you keep this up. I looked at my grandmother. Is that a threat? She sighed. It's reality. I stood. Then this lunch is over. Daniel grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but deliberately. Don't walk away from this, he said. I pulled my hand free. I already did. That night, Raymond sent me a draft motion. What's this? I asked when we spoke. A petition to be named sole executor, he said. Your parents included a clause. Contingent, but valid. I swallowed. That would remove Daniel completely. Yes, he said. I thought about the wellness check, the HR call, my grandmother's lunch. File it, I said. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Daniel stopped calling. Lauren didn't. She left a voicemail at 2 a.m. You think you're some kind of hero, she slurred. You're just a bitter little sister who got lucky. I saved it. By the time the court date arrived, Daniel had already lost control of the narrative. He just didn't know it yet. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally. Daniel sat at the opposite table, in a charcoal suit I'd seen him wear to my parents' anniversary dinner 3 years earlier. Lauren sat beside him, lips pressed tight, eyes scanning the room like she was searching for allies. Their attorney, a man with sharp features and an expensive watch, leaned in close, whispering last-minute instructions. Raymond sat next to me. He didn't whisper, he didn't fidget. He reviewed his notes with the calm of someone who had seen families dismantle themselves 100 times before. When the judge entered, Daniel straightened, confidence settling back into his posture. This was familiar territory for him. He believed in institutions. He believed they favored people who looked like him. The judge began with procedure. Names, case number, a brief summary. Then Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, he said, this case is a tragic example of grief manifesting as conflict. My client's sister has acted impulsively, freezing estate operations and forcing unnecessary legal intervention. I watched Daniel nod subtly. She was living in the home temporarily, the attorney continued, out of kindness. My client simply attempted to bring structure to a chaotic situation. Raymond rose slowly. Your Honor, he said, we will demonstrate that my client was not temporarily housed. She was a full-time resident for over 2 years, providing unpaid care to both parents. We will also show documented attempts by the opposing party to unlawfully remove her and restrict her access to basic utilities. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't editorialize. He laid out facts, emails, texts, the lock change invoice, the Wi-Fi service transfer, the wellness check request, the voicemail from Lauren, played in open court. Lauren's face went white when her voice filled the room. I'd like to address the petition for executor status, the judge said after a pause. Mr. Mercer? Daniel stood. Your Honor, he began. My parents always trusted me with their affairs. I'm the oldest. I'm an attorney. This is what they would have wanted. Raymond handed up a document. The will includes a contingency clause, he said. In the event of coercion, misrepresentation, or attempts to dispossess a beneficiary, executor authority transfers. The judge, Raymond, turned slightly toward me. Emily Mercer. Daniel's head snapped up. That clause was never activated, his attorney said quickly. It was, Raymond replied. When my client was locked out of the residence and presented with a coerced occupancy agreement, the judge. Daniel shifted. Lauren whispered something urgently. Finally, the judge looked up. Mr. Mercer, she said, did you change the locks on the residence? Daniel hesitated. Did you restrict internet access used for employment? She asked. Silence. Did you initiate or encourage a wellness report without evidence of harm? Daniel swallowed. I was concerned. The judge's voice remained neutral. Concern does not justify coercion. She looked back at the file. Executor authority is transferred effective immediately. The sound Daniel made wasn't loud. It was small, like air leaving a tire. Lauren grabbed his arm. This is ridiculous, she hissed. The judge continued. All estate decisions will proceed under Ms. Mercer's authority. Any interference will be considered contempt. The gavel struck once. It was over. Outside the courtroom, Daniel approached me. "This isn't finished," he said quietly. I looked at him. Really looked. The confidence was gone. What remained was something thinner, desperate. "It is," I replied. Lauren laughed sharply. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I didn't answer. 2 days later, I received the estate's full financial disclosure. Something Daniel hadn't mentioned. A family business. Not large, not glamorous. A small manufacturing company my father had co-founded decades ago. Quietly profitable. Consistently so. Daniel had been planning to sell it. Quickly, at a discount. To a firm where one of his former colleagues worked. Raymond called it what it was. A self-dealing transaction. I called it the final piece. That night, I sat alone in my parents' kitchen and reviewed the numbers, the contracts, the emails Daniel had already sent to prospective buyers. He hadn't just tried to remove me, he'd tried to erase oversight. And now, for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. The first thing I did as executor was nothing. That unsettled everyone. Raymond expected instructions. The accountant emailed twice asking how I wanted to proceed. Even Daniel's attorney sent a formal request for a timeline regarding asset liquidation. I didn't respond to any of it for 3 days. Instead, I drove to the manufacturing plant. It sat on the edge of a small industrial park, an hour west of the city. A low brick building with faded signage that still carried my father's last name. Mercer Tool and Die. He'd never wanted anything flashy, just something that worked. Inside, the air smelled like oil and metal. The hum of machines was steady, comforting. Men and women in work boots nodded as I passed, unsure who I was, but polite enough not to ask. I introduced myself to the office manager, a woman named Carol, who had worked there longer than I'd been alive. "You're Robert's daughter," she said, standing, "the one who used to do homework in the break room." I smiled. That was me. Her expression shifted. Relief, maybe. "We heard there was talk of selling," she said carefully. "There was," I replied. "There isn't anymore." She didn't smile. She exhaled. Over coffee in her cramped office, she showed me numbers Daniel had never shared. The company wasn't struggling. It was stable, profitable enough to support 20 families and modest growth. "He wanted to sell fast," Carol said. "Didn't care to whom." I thanked her and left with copies of everything. That night, I sent one email. To Daniel, "I'm reviewing the business. Do not contact buyers. Any further communication will be documented." He replied within minutes. "You're over your head." I didn't respond. The next move came from Lauren. She showed up at the house unannounced that Saturday afternoon. "I just want to talk," she said, standing on the porch like she belonged there. I didn't invite her in. "This doesn't have to be hostile," she continued. "Daniel made mistakes. We all did. You called Adult Protective Services," I said. She flinched. That was concern. "It was control," I replied. She crossed her arms. "You think running a business makes you powerful now." "No," I said. "Knowing when someone's lying does." She stared at me for a long moment. "You're going to ruin him," she said. I tilted my head. He did that himself. That evening, Raymond called. Daniel's attorney requested mediation, he said. They want to discuss settlement. "About the business?" I asked. "Yes." I thought of Carol, of the workers, of my father's name on the building. "No," I said. "We'll proceed formally." The following week, I issued a notice. As executor, I froze the sale, initiated an internal audit, appointed an independent board advisor. Daniel exploded. Voicemails, emails, messages through relatives. "You're doing this out of spite. You don't understand how this works. You're humiliating me." I saved everything. Then I found the email. Buried in the audit files. Sent 6 months before my father died. From Daniel. "I can push the valuation down if we move quickly. Emily won't notice." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Raymond. "This changes things," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "It does." At Thanksgiving, I didn't go to my grandmother's house. Neither did Daniel. People chose sides without saying they were choosing. That night, alone at the table my parents once filled, I signed another document. A motion for damages, not revenge. Accountability. The hearing was set for January, and this time, Daniel wouldn't be defending himself. He'd be explaining himself. January came quietly. Snow softened the edges of everything, including the house. The garden slept under a clean white cover, And for the first time since my parents died, the silence didn't feel hostile. It felt neutral, like a pause before something decided which way to fall. The hearing was scheduled for the second Tuesday of the month. Until then, Daniel said nothing. That worried me more than his anger ever had. When someone like Daniel goes quiet, it isn't reflection, it's preparation. 2 days before the hearing, my grandmother called. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said. Her voice sounded smaller than it used to. "You've already won." "I'm not trying to win," I replied. "I'm trying to stop him from doing this again." "To whom?" she asked. I didn't answer. That morning, Raymond forwarded me a message from Daniel's attorney. They were withdrawing. No explanation, no warning, just a formal notice of termination of representation. Raymond called immediately. "That's unusual," he said, "especially this close to a hearing." "What does it mean?" I asked. "It means Daniel thinks he can handle this himself," Raymond replied. "Or he's about to change tactics." I found out which one before the day was over. At 4:17 p.m., my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Emily," Daniel said when I answered. His voice was calm, too calm. "I need to see you." "No," I said. "Just hear me out," he replied. "At the house. One last time." I hesitated. "You owe me that," he added. I closed my eyes. "You don't get to tell me what I owe you." A pause, then, softer. "I'm sorry." That word again, used like a key, like a shortcut. "I'll have my lawyer present," I said. He exhaled sharply. "Of course she will." When he arrived that evening, he looked different. Thinner, tired. The suit was still tailored, but the confidence didn't fill it anymore. We sat across from each other at the dining room table. Raymond joined by video call. Silent, but visible. Daniel clasped his hands. "I made mistakes," he said. "I was trying to protect the family." "You tried to protect yourself," I replied. He flinched, then nodded. "Maybe. But this hearing, it will destroy what's left." "What's left of what?" I asked. "Our name," he said. "Our parents' reputation." I leaned back. "You invoked their name when it suited you." His jaw tightened. "If this goes forward, the emails will become public record." "Yes," I said. He looked at Raymond on the screen. "You know how this will look." Raymond didn't respond. Daniel turned back to me. "Withdraw the motion. I'll step away from the business. I'll accept the will as is." "And the damage you already did?" I asked. He swallowed. "I'll apologize." "Privately?" I asked. He didn't answer. I stood. "Then we're done." He rose too, voice sharp now. "You think this makes you strong?" "No," I said. "It makes me finished." He stared at me for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged. "You always were stubborn," he muttered. "No," I corrected. I was quiet. "You confused the two." After he left, Raymond ended the call. "You handled that well," he said. "I'm not done," I replied. The day of the hearing, Daniel represented himself. That alone spoke volumes. The judge listened, read, asked questions Daniel couldn't dodge. When the email appeared on the screen, the one about pushing valuation down, the courtroom went still. Daniel tried to explain. Context, stress, misinterpretation. The judge didn't interrupt. When she finally spoke, her tone was measured. "This court finds evidence of attempted self-dealing and breach of fiduciary duty," she said. "Damages will be assessed." Daniel closed his eyes. I felt nothing. Outside the courtroom, Lauren waited. She looked at me like she wanted to say something. Then she turned and walked away. The judgment would come later. Numbers, penalties, consequences. What mattered had already happened. The truth was no longer private. And Daniel could no longer hide behind it. The judgment arrived by mail. Not certified. Not dramatic. Just a thick envelope waiting on the hall table when I came back from work one afternoon. Snow melting off my boots. I didn't open it right away. I made tea. I fed the cat my parents had adopted late in life, the one Daniel never liked because it shed. I sat at the kitchen table and looked out at the backyard, where my father used to shovel paths through the snow, just so my mother could look at the garden even in winter. Then I opened the envelope. The court found Daniel personally liable, not just removed, not just reprimanded, liable for attempted self-dealing, for misrepresentation, for costs incurred due to bad faith actions, for interference with estate administration. The number at the bottom wasn't small. It wasn't catastrophic either. It was precise. Enough to hurt. Enough to teach. Raymond called an hour later. "He's appealing," he said. "I expected that," I replied. "It won't change much," he added. "The findings are solid." "I'm not worried," I said, and I meant it, because by the time Daniel decided to fight, the fight had already shifted. The next week, Mercer Tool & Die held its annual employee meeting. Normally, it was something Daniel would attend in a suit, shaking hands, talking about legacy. This time, I stood at the front of the room in a plain sweater, notes in my hand. Carol seated beside me. "I'm not here to make promises," I said. "I'm here to make something clear. This company isn't being sold, and it isn't being stripped." A murmur rippled through the room. "My father believed in building something steady," I continued. "That doesn't change because he's gone." When I finished, people didn't clap. They nodded. Some smiled. A few looked relieved enough to blink back tears. That night, I received an email from a buyer Daniel had contacted months earlier. "If you ever reconsider." I didn't respond. 2 days later, Daniel's appeal was denied on procedural grounds. He called me that evening. I let it ring twice before answering. "What do you want?" I asked. Silence on the line. Then, quietly, "I don't know who I am without this." I leaned against the counter. "That's not my responsibility." He laughed softly. "You always say things like that now." "I always thought them," I replied. "I just didn't say them out loud." He didn't argue. "Lauren left," he said finally. I said nothing. "She took the kids to her sister's," he added. "Says she needs space." I closed my eyes. Not in satisfaction. In recognition. "This is your fault," he said, but without conviction. "No," I said. "This is the result." Another pause. "I never thought you'd fight back," he admitted. "I know," I said. After the call, I went into my parents' bedroom and opened the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Inside were old photo albums, letters, my mother's scarves, still faintly scented with her perfume. Tucked between 2 albums was a small envelope. Inside was a note in my father's handwriting. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means you stood up. We hoped you would." I sat on the bed and let myself feel it then. Not triumph, not revenge, validation. At Christmas, I hosted dinner at the house. Not the whole family, just a few cousins who'd reached out quietly. Carol and her husband, Marissa. People who showed up without expectations. Daniel wasn't invited. Neither was Lauren. The house was warm, lived in. No speeches, no toast to legacy. Just food, conversation, space. After everyone left, I stood alone in the kitchen and realized something had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. The appeal paperwork sat unopened in a drawer. Let him try. I had already moved on. The appeal dragged on longer than I expected, not because it had merit, but because Daniel needed it to. Every delay bought him time to avoid what came next. Creditors, professional consequences, the slow unraveling of a reputation built on control and certainty. In March, I received a letter from the State Bar. They weren't accusing Daniel of anything yet, just requesting clarification. Context, documentation. Raymond smiled when he read it. Not because he enjoyed it, but because he understood what it meant. "This is the part people don't see," he said. "Courtrooms get the drama. Oversight boards get the truth." I didn't forward the letter to Daniel. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, his name disappeared from his firm's website. Quietly. No announcement, no explanation. At Mercer Tool & Die, spring brought orders. Steady ones. A new contract with a regional supplier that Carol had been nurturing for years without anyone noticing. I approved a modest expansion. New equipment, a raise across the floor. I didn't tell anyone it was in my parents' memory. I didn't need to. In April, Lauren emailed me. Not a demand. Not an accusation. A question. "Can I bring the kids by to see the house sometime?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, "No." No explanation. No qualifiers. Just a boundary. She didn't write back. That same week, my grandmother sent me a birthday card. Inside was a check. Uncashed. Symbolic. "I hope one day we can all be together again," she wrote. I folded the card and placed it in a drawer. Hope is not a plan. Daniel's appeal hearing was scheduled for early May. He showed up with a new attorney this time. younger, aggressive, the kind who mistook volume for strength. They argued technicalities, intent, familial misunderstanding. The judge listened patiently, then denied it. Final. Daniel didn't look at me as we stood to leave. He gathered his papers, hands shaking just enough to be visible, and walked out of the courtroom without a word. I didn't follow. That afternoon, I signed the last set of documents transferring full ownership of the house into my name. No trust, no conditions, no intermediaries. The pen felt heavier than it should have. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. Not because I was safe, because I was finished. In June, I sold my old apartment lease rights and donated most of the furniture I'd never unpacked. I planted new hydrangeas along the back fence. I hired a local designer to restore the porch swing my father built. People in the neighborhood stopped asking how Daniel was. They started asking how I was doing. The shift was subtle, but it mattered. One evening, as I locked up the house, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I'm proud of you. Mom would be too." I stared at it, then deleted it. Pride, offered late, doesn't repair harm. By summer, Daniel had moved again. Smaller place, different town. I heard it through cousins, through whispers. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need updates. The house no longer held his echo. On the first anniversary of my mother's death, I sat alone in the garden and read her old notes. Grocery lists, planting reminders, a line about how tulips needed patience. She was right. Patience, I'd learned, wasn't passive. It was preparation. And when the time came, I had chosen myself. I thought the story was over. That was my mistake. Closure is a comforting idea, but real life doesn't respect clean endings. It circles back when you least expect it, usually wearing a different face. In late August, I received a call from a number with a Florida area code. I didn't answer. They left a voicemail. "Emily, this is Judge Harriet Collins. I'm calling in a personal capacity. Please call me back." I listened to it twice. Judge Collins had presided over the probate hearing. Judges don't call people personally unless something has gone wrong or something has surfaced that shouldn't be ignored. I called back. She didn't waste time. "Your brother is under investigation," she said, formally. "For what?" I asked. She paused. "Multiple counts of professional misconduct, some unrelated to you, some very much related." My hand tightened around the phone. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because he named you," she replied, "as someone who might cooperate." "I already did," I said, "through the court." "I know," she said. "This is beyond probate now." After the call, I sat at the dining room table for a long time, staring at nothing. I hadn't wanted this, not like this, but I also didn't stop it. 2 weeks later, a subpoena arrived, not for testimony against Daniel, for records, emails, documents, the same ones Raymond had already compiled. Raymond assured me this was routine. "They're building a timeline," he said. "Yours is already clean." Daniel called me that night. His voice was hoarse. "They're taking my license," he said. "I need you to tell them I was under pressure, that I wasn't thinking clearly." I closed my eyes. "You were thinking clearly," I said. "You just didn't expect consequences." "You're my sister," he said. "I was," I replied. He exhaled sharply. "So that's it?" "Yes," I said. The hearing took place without me. Daniel surrendered his license 6 weeks later. No ceremony, no apology. Just a notice, buried on a regulatory website no one reads unless they're looking for it. Lauren filed for divorce shortly after. I heard the children were adjusting. Kids always do. In October, Mercer Tool & Die celebrated its 40th anniversary. Carol asked me to say a few words. I stood in the same break room where I used to do homework and spoke simply. "This place exists because people showed up," I said, "day after day, quietly. That matters." Afterward, an older man approached me, one of the original employees. "Your dad would be proud," he said. That night, I walked through the house and realized something. I no longer thought about Daniel every day, not with anger, not with sadness, just occasionally, like a scar you forget until you catch it in the mirror. In November, I received a final letter from Daniel. No return address. Inside was a single page. "I see now what I couldn't then. I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know I understand." I folded it once, then placed it in the fire. Not out of spite, out of completion. I watched it burn until nothing recognizable remained. The house felt warmer afterward. The house didn't feel quiet anymore. That surprised me. For a long time, silence had meant absence, missing voices, unfinished conversations, the echo of people who used to fill rooms and didn't anymore. But as winter settled in again, the quiet changed its texture. It stopped pressing down on me. It started holding me up. On the morning of Thanksgiving, I woke before dawn and stood at the kitchen window, watching frost creep along the edges of the glass. I brewed coffee the way my mother used to, strong and unapologetic, and laid out ingredients across the counter. I cooked slowly, intentionally, not to impress anyone, not to recreate a past that was already gone, just because I wanted to. By noon, the house smelled like roasted turkey and sage. A few cars pulled up out front. Marissa arrived first, carrying a pie and a grin. Carol followed with her husband and a bottle of wine wrapped in a towel. 2 cousins I hadn't seen in years came next, tentative at first, then visibly relieved when they stepped inside and realized this wasn't going to be a performance. No speeches, no seating chart, no pretending everything was fine. Just food, conversation, and the freedom to leave if you wanted to. At one point, someone asked if I missed the old holidays, the big ones, the ones my parents hosted when the whole family still pretended to like each other. I thought about it for a moment. I miss the parts that were real, I said. Not the rest. No one argued. After dinner, as people lingered with coffee and leftovers, I stepped outside onto the porch. Snow had started to fall, light and steady. The porch swing creaked as I sat down, wrapped in a blanket my mother used to keep by the door. I thought about the version of myself from a year earlier, the woman standing in a driveway in a black coat, being told without ceremony that she no longer belonged. I thought about how small I'd felt then, how easily displaced, how quickly love had turned conditional. And I realized something important. What hurt the most back then wasn't losing the house, or the inheritance, or even my brother. It was losing the illusion that compliance would keep me safe. I'd been raised to believe that staying quiet was a virtue, that accommodating others was the same as being kind, that if I didn't ask for much, no one could take much from me. I was wrong. People don't respect silence. They use it. Choosing myself hadn't been loud. It hadn't been dramatic. It had been a series of small, unglamorous decisions. Calling a lawyer. Saying no. Letting other people be uncomfortable. Refusing to explain myself to those committed to misunderstanding me. There was no single moment of revenge. No speech that brought the house down. No public shaming that made everything right. Just consequences. Applied steadily. Without apology. In December, I received an email from someone who watched the hearing online and recognized my story. She wrote that she was in her 60s, living with a sister who treated her like a guest in her own home. She didn't know how to leave. She didn't know where to start. I wrote back, "Start by believing that your presence has value," I said. "Everything else follows from there." On Christmas morning, I didn't rush. I made eggs. I listened to the radio. I opened one gift, a book Marissa had given me, and left the rest for later. The day stretched in front of me, unclaimed. I liked it that way. My name is Emily Mercer. I was excluded quietly, pressured politely, pushed out without being touched. And when I finally stopped cooperating, the people who benefited from my silence called it betrayal. It wasn't. It was a boundary. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, or made to feel like you were taking up too much space just by existing, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from and what part of the story stayed with you. And if you want to hear more stories about family drama, betrayal, inheritance, and the moment the tables finally turn, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay with me. Sometimes, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Tiếp chương 12. Chapter 12. Continued. In the weeks after Thanksgiving, something unexpected happened. Nothing. No calls, no emergencies, no family drama disguised as concern. The silence held. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fill it. That was how I knew the cycle had broken. I spent December doing ordinary things that used to feel indulgent. I replaced the cracked tiles in the upstairs bathroom. I repainted the guest room a soft gray and turned it into a small office, facing the yard where my mother once planned her garden beds on scraps of paper. I framed a few old photos, not the staged ones, but the candid ones. My parents laughing, me in the background, half out of frame, unimportant at the time, seen now. The estate finally closed 2 days before Christmas. No fanfare, no family meeting. Just a final email from Raymond confirming what I already knew. The house was mine. The business was stable. The last legal thread connecting Daniel to my life had been cut. When I read the email, I didn't feel relief. I felt grounded. On New Year's Eve, Marissa asked if I had resolutions. I already made the only one that mattered, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Which was? I stopped negotiating my right to exist, I replied. January marked 1 full year since my mother's death. I visited her grave alone, early in the morning before anyone else arrived. I didn't bring flowers, just stood there in the cold, hands in my coat pockets, breathing in the quiet. I kept the house, I said out loud, and I kept myself. The wind moved through the trees. No answers, no signs. That was okay. In February, Mercer Tool & Die signed a long-term contract that ensured stability for the next decade. Carol hugged me when the paperwork went through. Not as an employee, as a witness. You didn't have to do this, she said. I know, I replied. I chose to. Daniel never contacted me again. I heard through the family network that he'd moved out of state, that he was working in a non-legal role, consulting quietly, avoiding anyone who might ask questions. Some people framed it as tragedy, others as bad luck. I framed it as consequence. Late one evening in March, I found myself rereading my mother's old planner. The last page held a note she never crossed out. Emily needs to stop shrinking. I closed the book and laughed softly. I did, I said to the empty room. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or violence. Sometimes it arrives with paperwork, with polite smiles, with people who tell you they know what's best for you while quietly removing your choices. And revenge doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like refusing to be managed. Sometimes it looks like keeping the house. Sometimes it looks like sleeping well at night, knowing you didn't trade your dignity for approval. My name is Emily Mercer. I was excluded, manipulated, pressured to disappear. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I documented. I waited. I acted. And when the tables turned, I didn't flip them. I simply sat at the head of my own life and stopped asking for permission. If you've ever been made to feel like love had conditions, like belonging was something you had to earn by staying small, I see you. Tell me in the comments what moment in this story felt familiar to you. And if you want more real-life revenge stories about family drama, betrayal, inheritance, and karma finally catching up, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. Some endings aren't loud, they're final.